Welcome everyone, welcome to Kitchen Table Creativity. I'm Donna Leffler and I am going to paint a beautiful watercolor bouquet of flowers today with you. And I call this the Mother's Day Bouquet. Now this image could be on a card, it could be on just a plain piece of paper and framed. It doesn't really have to be for Mother's Day, but I just think it's a beautiful spring image and it's a very, very simple beginner-friendly project, most importantly. So I am going to trace mine and I'm going to put it on a card, and I will put a link to this type of watercolor paper. It's scored down the middle so that you can fold it, and it comes with envelopes also, but it's all ready to use. So I am going to trace mine. I always tell people it's perfectly fine to trace. I'm going to not trace every detail because there's a lot of detail in this image, but I'm going to trace the main outlines. It just makes it a lot easier to center it on the page, and then I don't have to worry about the composition so much. I can just focus on the color and the painting. So real quick, the supplies, I showed you my watercolor paper. I am going to trace using graphite paper. I cut it to the right size on one side. And this one I've used quite a bit. It lasts over and over, so you can use these for several projects. So you put the graphite paper face down, you put your image on top, and then you can either use a pencil, a pen, or sometimes the papers come with a stylus. I like to use the stylus. I don't bother taping this down. I just hold it and I trace it, and it works just fine. Okay, so the paints, the color palette that I have here, it's kind of muted tones, I think, and use whatever paints that you have on hand, but I'm going to show you quickly the colors that I'm using. So the yellow is a cadmium yellow, and the green is Hooker's green. These are pretty common colors in watercolors. Cerulean blue is the blue. Rose madder is the red or the pink. And then I have this burnt sienna, which I'm going to use for the ribbon. So you can see that these colors look quite a bit darker than the actual palette that I'm using. But you can water them down. You can always add white to them if you'd like. You can try mixing them. You might mix your rose color with the yellow to get the ribbon and bow, which is that more orangey color. So you could try different things. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Or you can pick completely different colors based on the colors that you might have on hand or that you like better. Now you can see like this is a very dark pink. So I'm going to water that down quite a bit, and I'll show you that when we get started. Okay, so then I showed you my watercolor paper. I have this ceramic palette, which I'm going to do my mixing on. These two brushes I always use over and over. They're a number 2 and a number 5. You can use whatever brushes you have. This is pretty small. Almost all the projects I do are small, and I keep it that way on purpose, especially for beginners, because you can complete them quickly. There's not a lot of paint that you have to use. So the more simple it is when you're starting out, I think the better. I have a water bottle here. I like to spritz my paints and get them ready that way. And then for the finishing, I have 2-micron pens. I almost always use the 005 and the 05. And then I have these white pens, a roller ball, and a Sharpie paint pen. And I might use these or not. Just make sure that if you do finish with pens that you have permanent ink. And I have 3 jars of water over here, which are all ready for me. I like to have a lot of water on hand so that I don't have to get up and go get more water, because it seems like when you're rinsing your brushes, the water does get dirty pretty quickly. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and trace my image, and I'll be right back. So here I have my image traced. And I have put quite a bit of detail on this. Mainly this is for just the purpose of my videos. If you don't want to draw every single one of these things, by all means, you don't have to. You can freehand this. It's such a simple outline of the flowers, you really don't have to draw anything if you don't want to. Or you can just draw some of it. Okay, so, and another thing you can do is if you don't want the pencil lines, I have them pretty dark, again, because I want you to be able to see it. But you could take an eraser, a kneaded eraser, or just any type of eraser, and you can lightly erase your lines if you don't want your pencil lines to be as dark. So to start here, I'm going to just wet my brush. I'm going to start with a little bit bigger brush. This is the number 5. I'm going to take this dark rose color, and I'm going to water it down a lot because it's very dark. And we're going to start by just doing a light wash on the roses and the one little tulip. And something else that I forgot to say was that it's good to have a piece of scrap paper on hand, and that way you can see, like, this is a nice light pink. And sometimes it's deceiving with watercolors. You can't really tell what color it is until you get it on the paper. And so rather than putting it straight onto your work, you might want to test it that way. Another thing, it's good to have some paper towel or a rag on hand that you can blot your brush with. I tend to put paper towel on my workspace so that I can just blot it straight on there. All right, so to start with, we're going to do this rose, and what I'm going to do is just I'm going to leave some white, and I'm not going to paint the whole entire thing a solid color. Now, you can do it this way, or you can paint your whole entire rose and then just go back with a white pen if you want to. Again, there's really no right or wrong way to do this. And even if you go outside the lines a little bit, that's actually a good thing. It makes it look a little more whimsical when you go back, and we're going to go back and put some black outlines. All right, so I'm going to leave that one like that. And then we have this one, which looks like another rose in a different angle. And then we have this little one, which looks more like a tulip up here. And I'm kind of purposely going outside the lines a little bit because I want it to have that whimsical kind of look. All right, so now, as far as these daisies go, we're going to kind of just leave them as they are, except for the yellow centers. So I'm going to rinse my brush really well now. And I'm going to move on to this yellow, and I'm going to keep this pretty dark because I want these centers to kind of pop. And then we have these little roundish flower over here. And again, I'm kind of going outside the lines on purpose here. Okay. Rinsing my brush really well again. And now I am going to do the bluish color foliage. It's probably like maybe supposed to look like eucalyptus. I'm going to test this again because I want it to be pretty light. Okay. And I think by adding blue into this, it just kind of adds a little more color and fun to this very simple bouquet of flowers. And I was thinking, you know, you could use this, of course, for Mother's Day, which is coming up. But depending on when you're watching this video, maybe it's nowhere near Mother's Day. Maybe it's the middle of winter and you just feel like having some beautiful flowers. So you can paint them anytime. You can give them to a friend. Once you're done painting it, you could give it to a friend, brighten their day. Or maybe you have a bridal shower and you want to have a nice special card that the bride-to-be could keep. That would be very special. Okay, and so you can see here, just as far as composition goes, we have then these 3 areas of blue, we have these 3 areas of pink, and then we actually have 4 areas of yellow, but you can really see the 3 centers of these daisies. And so that's, as far as composition go, the rule of 3s. It works really well with any composition, really. It just makes everything look more balanced. Now rinsing my brush again. I'm going to move on to the leaves. And I'm doing all of this sort of as like a first pass through the image. And I have a little water that dropped on there, so I'm going to blot it off, which is another thing. You can always use a piece of paper towel or a piece of tissue to blot off anything that isn't supposed to be there. Which is another thing that's really great about watercolor. It's very forgiving. Okay, now I'm going to just start to work on the leaves. And I am making this pretty light also. Now I'm staying with the larger brush. You can switch to your smaller brush if you would rather, or just stay with one. And the thing that's great about these round tip brushes is that they have a very fine tip, and if you just hold the brush up a little bit at an angle, you can get very, very fine lines. And I am going to go back and add a little more to this. We're just really at the first phase of a very light wash. So I'm going to take a little bit of darker green here, and I'm going to start to fill in these stems a bit. Very light touch, just barely touch the paper, and you can get these really fine lines. This is also a nice practice technique on your scrap paper, to just practice with your brush, practice connecting the brush to your paper. Okay, I think that's good for the green leaves. Okay, so now I'm going to paint the ribbon, and I'm going to just try this this orangish, brownish color. I'm going to, again, water it down a lot. And I'm going to test it out first. It's quite dark. I don't want it to be very dark. Okay. And I'm switching also to my smaller brush, which you can also, but you don't have to have a smaller one for this. I just had a feeling like this is a little more detailed, smaller area, and I don't necessarily want to go outside too much of the lines here. All right, I think that's a good contrast. So now that I have the basics done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to just grab some darker colors and I'm going to add a little detail to these. I'm going to start with the rose and this darker color. Again, I'm going to leave the white here, but I'm going to just start adding in, especially into the center here, some darker contrasting areas. And when you're doing this, you kind of, just to think like the inside of a flower, like if it was at an angle like this, it probably would be a little bit darker. And your paint can either be wet or dry for this. If it's not all the way dry, it's totally fine. And it seems to be drying pretty quickly here on my paper, so I'm gonna go back and just put a few more details in the center here on this rose. I'm always so amazed at how little paint I have to use to do these smaller projects. Again, if you feel like you don't have enough white, which is a pretty common thing when you're first starting to do watercolor painting, it's totally fine. You can go back and I might even on mine add a few details with the white pen. All right, and then I'm especially going to do the same thing with the green, especially on the stems. I want the stems to be darker. And then also some of these leaves. You might not want to do every single one of them. Just kind of use your own creative intuition on this. There's no right or wrong way. You can kind of just take a little step back, say, oh, where does it need a little more color? What do I want to stand out a little more? And go from there. This is how you layer the different colors so that they have a little more interest, a little more depth or shadow, and to always start out really light. And then you can always add in more dark. But once you have the dark, it's harder to get it back to light if you want to. I mean, you can like add water to your brush and try to lift it. But then, like I said, it's just easier to do it this way to begin with. And I can see there's kind of a little spot here where it's empty, so I'm just going to add a little more green there. And you can also just go ahead and add a few more leaves just for fun if you want to. And then the last little bit of detail work I'm going to do here, I'm going to take the yellow and make it very, very diluted again. I want this like so light. It's barely going to show, and I'm going to take that and just put a very little bit on these daisies. I want them mostly white. But this is almost going to be like, I don't know, make it a little more dimensional, I guess. Just ever so slight. I don't want it to actually look yellow, just sort of like a reflection maybe. And then the last thing, I am going to just add a very slight bit of blue also to these leaves. And then the last thing here, the bow, I'm going to add a little more darker to that, make it stand out. Okay, and I like the way this has turned out. I am going to now go and do a little bit of outlining with my pens. So now I moved my palette out of the way, and I like to have enough room to be able to reach my image with the pen. And I'm going to use this 02. I usually use a 05, but I wanted it to be a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, because this is a more delicate project, the flowers. So this is a 02 micron pen. And now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and outline as if I'm sketching this, as if I'm drawing it very kind of lightly, because I don't want very dark, harsh lines. I want it to be light, kind of airy looking. And again, you kind of want this to be not perfect. You want it to look like it was hand drawn. And sort of like a sketching motion if you were hand drawing this. This is called watercolor sketching, and it's a really nice, easy way to not only cover up the pencil lines, but just make your project look really, really finished. And you can add little dots. It's almost like a doodle project. I really love this part. It's fun. And there's really no way that you can mess this up, because like I said before, it's kind of good to kind of go outside the lines. Because that way it looks like it's hand done. We don't want it to look super perfect. And this is something, again, the more you practice it, the easier it will get. And the faster you will get. And if you enjoy these super easy projects, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube, but also I have a project that I do every single week. It's totally free, and it's called the Creative Heart Journal, and I email that out to people. Always has a seasonal theme. Right now we're into spring. And I have just like the color palette I showed you at the beginning. I do that. I do little stories. I try to keep it kind of lighthearted, and it's about 5 pages long. It's like a digital format, so it's like what we call a flip book mini magazine. Totally free, and the link is in the description if you want to sign up for that. That would be great. And I am going to start doing a free monthly workshop. And as I'm talking here, I am adding a little more detail to the center of this rose. Kind of want it to be. And so at the free monthly workshop, it will be online. And it will just be bring your own supplies, and in community we will do some painting and learn some new techniques, and I'll be doing that once a month. So if you're interested in that, I also have a link in the description Actually, I don't have a link for the workshop, but I do have links. When you sign up for the Creative Heart Journal, you will be notified via email about the workshop. So you can see, like, I'm kind of just going around adding in a few more detail lines here and there. I want it to look just like I just hand drew this. I don't want it to look all perfect. And so at this point, it's always good to just kind of take a step back and see. I have a little like smudge of pencil. And just kind of see, is there anything that I want to add? Like, I'm thinking I'm going to add a few little dots on the center of these daisies. And yours might look completely different than mine, which is totally fine. In fact, that's a good thing. If it looks different, it's your own creation. I love that. And I also would absolutely love if you do paint any of my projects to share your work with me. I would love to see what you have created. So again, just kind of take a step back. Is there anything that I want to add? Is there anything I missed? And I'm pretty happy with the way that has turned out. So the last thing that I always say is that you must sign your work. Make it your own and put the date so that you can keep track of your progress. I like to use this 005 pen. It's a very small, fine tip. And almost always I just choose a little area on the right-hand side to sign my name. And I just put my initials. And I always put the date, the year, because I really like to go back and see my progress. So again, take one last look. If there's anything you want to add, I like the way this has turned out. This has been a really easy, fun project. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel, please. Let me know if you have any ideas for any projects that you'd like to see. I can work on that for sure. I always like to hear what people are up to or hear about their ideas. And let's keep in touch. I will see you in the next video.